Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. It's so great to be here and with all of you. And before I get started, I just want to say thank you to everyone here, the panelists, participants, for joining and participating in this event despite all of the crazy things that are going on in our world right now. So thanks for being here and building community together. Today, I will be talking about climate justice in the United States from the perspective of Hawaii as well as climate adaptation. A little bit about me is I'm the interim executive director at Care About Climate Now. I was the climate ambassadors director when I was asked to be a part of this event and have since then transitioned into this interim role. So I'm really excited about that. And as mentioned, I am a volunteer at the City and County of Honolulu's Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency. So I'm really thankful for these opportunities. And we'll now just jump into my first slide here. Oh, just kidding. We'll go this way. Something that is really important to me and as well as many other activist community members here in the United States is offering a land acknowledgement in the beginning of our presentations, which gives thanks and recognition to the Indigenous communities who have been stewards of the land we are sitting on and for me volunteering on right now in Hawaii. So I wouldn't be able to be here otherwise. So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging that the Aina, which in Hawaii is land on which I am coming to you from today, is part of a larger territory recognized by Indigenous Hawaiians as their ancestral grandmother. And I recognize that every moment I am in Hawaii, she's nourishing and gifting me the opportunity to breathe, eat, drink, etc., play in the ocean, at the beach together. So I just want to recognize the generations of Indigenous Hawaiians and their knowledge systems that shaped Hawaii and sustainable ways that allow me to be here as a settler today. So just want to start with that. Thank you. So what are, the climate impacts in Hawaii? Before, jumping into adaptation and justice issues, it's really important to kind of have a base layer of science because it is the basis of climate change and how we can understand what is happening, right? In order to understand the now and pair that with where we want to go. So in Hawaii, it is a very, vulnerable island community out here in the middle of the Central Pacific Ocean. And temperatures here have risen by nearly 1 degree Celsius since the early 1900s. Sea levels have risen nearly 8 inches since 1960 and are predicted to actually increase now with the new data presented to us by multiple feet potentially by 2050. So it is quite alarming. Rainfall and water availability are consistently decreasing. And what you might know, right, of course, in islands is that once our water is gone, there's not other places we can pull from. So for instance, I grew up in a different state in Texas on the mainland in the US. And if we, had water issues, it'd be a little bit easier for us to potentially pull from other communities to kind of help supplement that water need since the rivers are connected, right, in one way or another. But here we have what we have. So it is quite alarming that things are on the decline. It's also increasingly likely that a hurricane will directly hit all of the Hawaiian Islands. There have been direct hits on 1 or 2 islands in the past, but that could increase our chances here on Oahu, the island I am on right now, to be hit by a hurricane. What's important about that is we've never been hit by one, so we don't know exactly how our infrastructure will hold up. So if that were to happen, it could be quite detrimental. And lastly, nearly 1/4 of beaches across the 3 islands here have already disappeared with, even more of these beaches predicted to be lost due to rising sea levels and beach erosion as a result of climate change. So that is kind of the state of where we're at right now in Hawaii when it comes to climate impacts. Moving on. Great. So, what are the issues, right, at a glance? We have the science, and now we need to understand what are the issues. It's really important to go back to those root causes on why the impacts of climate change and the science will be so harmful to this community. First, Hawaii was, destroyed essentially by colonization from the United States and back in time. But currently today, there are some community members that really advocate for Hawaii to be released from the military of the United States government. This is just one position. There are, of course, many positions when it comes to colonization, especially with Hawaii in particular, right? It's really a big struggle for a lot of the Native Hawaiians here who see their land getting taken away and destroyed, not just because of climate change, but because of settlers that came in and just took the land. So colonization is really, really important to address here as a local issue. Second, another issue facing us is the reliance on tourism. Tourism supplements, I believe, around 80% of the economy here in Hawaii. So when COVID happened, for instance, and we didn't have that tourism here that we're used to having, our economy took a huge hit. But it also, not just our economy was impacted, but it also impacted a lot of the community members and livelihoods of people here who really rely on tourism as their main source of income. Lastly, when it comes to climate change, there is also a lack of capacity to act. 95% of our food is imported, which is quite alarming if there were to be any type of other climate impacts on, mainland USA, for instance, where all of our food is shipped from California. They would probably be less likely to ship us food, which is, really significant when you think about climate change and the fact that, it is getting harder to grow food in certain places, and we are having to rely on other people a lot more to meet our needs. So I think that is something really important to be aware of. Moving on. So how are we responding, right? We have all these climate impacts and we have all these other issues, colonization, reliance on tourism, lack of capacity to grow our own food in many ways. And also for, government, there's a lot of people that are, leave the island for better opportunities that may not be offered here. So there's a lot that's happening, right? Young people are serving on the Hawaii Youth Commission, which is the first commission we've had on youth in Hawaii, which is amazing. I have quite a few friends on that, and they're really excited to have their voices heard in government for deciding the fate of our future, right, as young people. They have the Americorps program, which is what I'm a part of, but they actually have their own localized program that gives young people the opportunity to learn a new skill or be a part of a nonprofit or the public sector in government that they might not have had before. So it's really amazing opportunity for young people. Next, young people are participating in community engagement offered by the city. It's really cool in my role. I get to help lead community engagement. So I'm always trying to advocate for the unheard voice, in particular, the Native Hawaiian community here and young people. So it's really amazing to see that they want to be involved and engaged. And, now that we're actually asking them to be engaged, they are excited to be a part of this process. So I'm really thankful for their welcoming me, someone who's not from here, into their community. And of course, like most young people, we're just talking about climate change, bringing it up in daily conversations, protesting when possible, and just doing things that, can spark that change in people. As I mentioned before, I also work in local government, so I thought I'd give a little perspective on what we're doing here at the sub-national level. We are trying to increase local food systems and composting in our community. And we are in the process of hopefully passing a sea level rise setback policy that will encourage homeowners to move back their homes so they can be protected for rising sea levels. And my other thing that I'm working on is the creation of a climate adaptation strategy for the community, which will be really important for engaging and connecting NGOs together with government opportunities to make sure that, while the rest of the world is not doing their job to mitigate carbon emissions and mitigate climate change, we are doing what we can to make sure that we can do our best to adapt so that we don't have to move and leave behind all of our cultural and indigenous knowledge that is just so valued, especially our connection to the land. So what can you do? One, you can acknowledge the root causes of climate change in your community. At the beginning, I shared some science. It's always good to have that background and know what's going on in your community to be able to address it. That also includes things for me in particular, like colonization, addressing it, naming it, saying that, it is part of history and something that we need to be cognizant of when thinking about solutions. Next, you can conduct research in your school, in your free time, but also through your papers and essays and things. I'm sure you all love writing, for those of you who are in school, but you can always focus on a climate change topic of interest to you. So you're learning and doing something that you already needed to do anyways. You can also join a nonprofit or community group. I know there's a lot of Fridays for Future groups around, as well as even international organizations like the people who are hosting your event or the organization I volunteer with, Care About Climate. We are currently seeking new volunteers. So if you're interested, definitely happy to have a side conversation about that and let you in on a little bit more about what we're doing. And a few other things you can do is just take action in your community, find something meaningful to you and make your voice heard and create an action that, you feel would be, really vital to creating change in your community. And lastly, you can combine your interests, right? It's always great to combine, if you're passionate about art, how can you think about climate action in the art that you're doing? Or, how can you show a dance, perform a dance and how it's meaningful to you? There's definitely a bunch of ways you can combine your interests. And I really encourage you to do that because in the long term, you'll be a lot more excited about the work that you're doing. Because climate activism can be hard. So when you have something else to combine that you're also passionate about, it can help make it feel a little bit better internally for you. And before I go, my most important tip for thinking about climate justice and climate action is it's really about meeting people where they're at. Not everybody will be on the same journey, and not everyone's going to know everything all the time. For example, when I go to different Indigenous communities here, I really take the time to get to learn what they're doing, what matters to them, and to talk with them and hear their stories before I even open my mouth, because at the end of the day, it's really about learning from them and learning where people are at. And then we can meet each other in the middle and are able to create a lot more change that way. So thank you so much for giving me this space. I know we'll have some time for questions shortly. And yeah, thank you so much.